You're being terrible. Why are you doing this?
I told you before. I don't want to live with you. I want the leech of a wife living off Dad to get out.
Leeching? You really think that?
Well, isn't it true? The only reason you can live here without working is because Dad earns the money. You can't even do the housework properly. You're nothing but a parasite. Sally's harsh words were too much for me to bear, and I lacked the energy to explain the situation. I realized there was no need to endure and live with someone capable of saying such things. So, you think we can't live together? That's my line. All right. I understand. I'll leave. After finishing my shopping, I went to change into my casual clothes in the room I shared with Ken. But what I saw next was shocking. There was not a single item of mine in the room. Not my clothes, not my bags, not even a single piece of underwear.
What's going on?
Unable to comprehend, I stood dumbfounded, scanning the room. The room wasn't ransacked, Ken's belongings were untouched, but mine were completely gone. Could it be that it wasn't a burglary? I needed to ask Sally, who was home while I was out. Thinking this, I knocked on Sally's door. Need something? Sally appeared, her face showing clear annoyance. Hey Sally, I can't find any of my stuff. Do you know anything about it? All my things are gone. Oh, that? I got rid of everything for you. Sally's grin was unsettlingly eerie. I am Maria, originally working in sales, but I quit after getting married. I met Ken, my husband, through a friend when I was 37. He was 8 years younger than me, but he was bright and full of conversation topics. We hit it off right away. A few months into our relationship, Ken spoke to me seriously. There's something I need to tell you, Maria. What's up? Well, I have a daughter. It was unexpected. At the time, Ken was 29. When I was 29, I was fully engrossed in work, with no time for men. To think that someone his age already had a child. In shock, I managed to ask. Really? How old is she? She just turned 11. 11? So that means? She was born when I was 18. I was reeling from the revelation. I tried desperately to hear Ken's words. Ken explained that he married his high school girlfriend after she got pregnant. His ex-wife dropped out of college to start their life together. But, being young, she left him and their daughter to enjoy her life. I'm sorry for bringing this up now. But as I started thinking about our future, I couldn't keep it a secret. Yeah, I'm shocked. I know. But I want to be with you, Maria. I want us to be a family. So, I had to be honest. His confession left me unsettled. At this age, I had just started dating again. Though unspoken, marriage was on my mind. But to think that my partner was divorced and had a child. If I broke up with Ken now, I might never get married. As I replayed Ken's words in my mind, I was contemplating my life's crossroads. Maria, I want to marry you. I know I've suddenly dropped a lot on you, and you might be confused, but I want you to think about it seriously. Ken looked at me intently, making me realize I was at a turning point in my life. 7 years after Ken's confession, I was living with him and my stepdaughter, Sally. Sally, aspiring to be a doctor, had just started her first year in medical school. Ken always boasted about how proud he was of her. He's always had a soft spot for Sally. Maybe out of guilt for her growing up without a mother. But it was excessive. He bought her anything she wanted, and she grew up without learning patience or restraint. I tried to instill basic decency in Sally. But it seemed to be nothing but an annoyance to her. She lashed out at me, saying, "Don't act all high and mighty just because you're older." That moment, I felt it was all so foolish. I decided to stop going out of my way for Sally. I resolved to only do the bare minimum for her from then on. One weekday, as usual, I prepared breakfast for the three of us and set the table. Ken started eating as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Sally took a bite, let out an exaggerated sigh, and commented, "Maria, you really never get any better at cooking, do you?" I thought this again. Lately, she had been especially critical of everything I did.
"I wish you'd understand what it's like to eat something this bad every day,"
she said and stormed out of the living room. Ken just continued eating silently. I couldn't tell if he was listening or just ignoring everything. In moments like this, Ken never stood up for me. I had no allies. But I didn't particularly feel sad about it. I realized there was no need for me to go out of my way for people who didn't care about me. It wasn't just bravado, that's genuinely how I felt. While Sally's lack of common sense was troubling, there was another issue that bothered me. Ken's extravagant spending habits. Besides spoiling Sally, Ken loved buying expensive items like bags, shoes, and watches. He seemed to want anything that was considered high-end. Whenever he ran out of money, he would pester me for it.
"Maria, I need you to come up with $1,000 by tomorrow." "Again? This is the second time this month. I've told you to manage your spending."
"Cut it out. This is how I relieve stress. Just get the money."
"I won't give you any more money. It doesn't grow on trees."
After I'd admonish him, Ken would gulp down his beer.
"You wouldn't understand the pressures of working outside. You're just a homemaker." "That's not fair. I have my struggles too. There are no breaks in housework, and neither you nor Sally ever help."
Then Ken would slam the table, echoing through the living room.
"Shut up. A leisurely wife should just listen to her husband and get the money ready."
Shouted down and intimidated by Ken's sudden outburst, I cowered in defense. An empty beer can was thrown at me, nearly hitting my shoulder. Ken often becomes aggressive when something doesn't go his way. Especially when he's been drinking. I remember he once raised his hand to me during a similar argument, and since then, I decided to avoid contradicting him as much as possible.
"Fine. I can't get $1,000, but I'll figure something out. Just stop threatening me like this." "Good, you should understand that from the start. Don't oppose me,"
he grumbled, opening another beer. I wondered why I was still in this place. The meaning of continuing as a family after being treated like this was becoming unclear to me. One day, Sally came home early as her afternoon class was cancelled. But even then, we didn't really spend time together. She stayed in her room and didn't come out. I remembered I needed to go shopping as the fridge was almost empty. It's easy to just get takeout when it's just me, but not with a family. With a sigh, I got up to do the grocery shopping. About an hour later, after finishing shopping and storing the groceries, I headed to change into my casual clothes in the room I shared with Ken. That's when I was confronted with a shocking scene. Not a single item of mine was in the room. Not my clothes, not my bags, not even a single piece of underwear.
"What's going on?"
I couldn't understand the situation and just stood there, dumbfounded. The room wasn't ransacked, Ken's belongings were still there, but all of mine were gone. It couldn't be a burglary, could it? I decided to ask Sally, who was home while I was out. I knocked on her door.
"Need something?"
Sally asked, her face appearing slightly through the door gap, looking displeased.
"Hey Sally, I can't find any of my stuff. Do you know anything about it? All my things are gone."
"Oh, that?
I took care of it,"
she said with a creepy smile.
"Took care of it? What do you mean?" "I don't want to live with you anymore. So, I made it easy for you to move out by getting rid of your stuff." "Are you telling me to leave the house?" "Don't put it that way. Living with a stepdaughter you're not related to must be stressful, right? Think of it as a choice for both of us to be free."
I couldn't understand Sally's extreme actions, doing all this supposedly for my sake. Even if her logic was somehow acceptable, she had no right to throw away my belongings.
"There were many important things in those bags. Where did you throw them?" "They're out by the back door. I arranged for a waste collection service, so if they haven't come yet, you might find them there."
In a panic, I rushed out back. Fortunately, the collection service hadn't arrived yet, and my belongings were piled up in several trash bags. I retrieved them and went back to confront Sally.
You're doing something terrible. Why are you doing this?
Like I said, I don't want to live with you.
I want the leech of a wife living off Dad to leave. Leeching? You really think that?
Isn't it true?
The only reason you can live here is because of the money Dad makes.
You can't even do much housework.
You're nothing but a parasite.
I had no energy left to explain the situation to Sally, who was only spouting such cruel words. There was no need to endure and live with someone capable of doing this.
Can't live together?
That's my line.
All right. I understand. I'll leave.
Hearing my words, Sally's expression suddenly brightened.
Great. Honestly, I thought you'd put up more of a fight, but I'm glad you accepted it so easily. Serves you right, old lady.
I had been tolerating everything because we were family, but now it just seemed foolish. Staying with these people was a waste of time. Fortunately or unfortunately, Sally's actions had saved me the trouble of packing. I decided to leave the house that very day. After leaving, I never heard from Ken. Normally, you'd expect at least a phone call, but his silence was proof enough that he had no intention of fixing our relationship. I didn't reach out to Ken or Sally either. I was relishing the freedom to use my time solely for myself. Since my parents' home was far away and I wasn't officially divorced yet, returning there with all my luggage wasn't practical. So, I rented a monthly apartment near the nearest train station and started living there. About 6 months later, my smartphone rang. It was Sally's name on the display. I ignored it at first, but she kept calling repeatedly, so I finally gave in and answered.
What do you want? It's annoying you keep calling. You finally answered. I knew you weren't ignoring me.
Sally's screeching voice burst through the phone, making me pull it away from my ear.
I can hear you fine, you don't need to shout. After all this time, what do you want now? It's urgent. Today, the university told me my tuition hasn't been paid. If I don't pay by the deadline, I won't be able to advance to the next year. Why didn't you handle it? Handle it yourself. Ask your dad for it. Dad's busy with work on weekdays. Handling payments like this is your job. He gives you the money to transfer. How dare you cause me trouble by not doing what you're supposed to?
Even in this situation, Ken hadn't told Sally the truth. Astonished, I decided to tell her the real story.
Listen. The tuition was never paid by your dad. What? What do you mean? It was me paying. But after the way you treated me, and since we're not living together anymore, I don't see why I should spend money on you. I have no plans to pay for anything in the future.
Sally was silent for a moment after hearing this, but then burst out laughing.
I thought you'd say something like that. As if a homemaker like you could afford medical school tuition. You must have just misused the money Dad gave you and are making excuses. Think what you want. But if you truly believe Ken is paying, talk to him about making the payment. These days, you don't even need to go to the bank, you can transfer online. Still lying? You'll just embarrass yourself. Just apologize honestly, and I might forgive you.
I was almost impressed by her audacity, even at the risk of her academic advancement. This is an extremely shameless act.
I've only told you the truth. Shameless woman. I'll confirm with Dad, that's enough. Getting rid of a wicked woman like you was the right choice.
Sally said her piece and hung up. Would Ken ever tell his daughter the truth? Their fate didn't concern me, but I hoped they wouldn't bother me again. One day, while working on my computer, Sally called again. It had been about 2 weeks since our last conversation.
Dad really didn't pay for my tuition. Of course. I was the one paying. Maybe he wanted to impress his daughter. But you were just a homemaker. How could you afford medical school tuition? I wasn't just a homemaker.
Sally gasped. Then said in a small voice, "What?"
I told you before. I work from home. That's a lie. I never heard that. You just never listened. Or did you think my words weren't worth your attention? That's impossible. You just forgot to tell me.
As Sally struggled with excuses, I continued.
I'm a programmer. I can work as long as I have my computer, and I was in IT even before I got married. I have plenty of job offers. A programmer? That's a job you can't do without special knowledge. If you're going to make something up, at least tell a more believable lie. I told you I used to work for an IT company. Being in sales, I had to have some basic knowledge, and I didn't start from zero. Turns out, the meticulous work of programming suits me well. I'm quite good at it, actually. That can't be. I always thought of you as a parasite, living off Dad's income. That's your dad, Ken, not me. He spent all his salary and never really contributed to the household expenses.
I could almost see the shocked expression on Sally's face. She must be overwhelmed to learn that everything she believed was false.
I was the one paying for your tuition, groceries, utilities, and all other living expenses. Dad never contributed financially to the household? Then, what was he spending his earnings on?
I don't know.
He never told me, but he definitely used it all for himself. And yet, he hasn't contacted me since I left. How's he managing? How? It's the same as before you left. You might want to check that. If Ken continues spending money like he used to, he'll go bankrupt soon. You won't have the luxury to go to college then.
After a feint that can't be. Sally hung up. Maybe it was harsh to discuss such things with my stepdaughter. But I stopped myself from feeling too sympathetic. Sally is 18, an adult. It's time she learns not to hurt others for her own sake. I returned to my computer work. A few days after telling Sally the truth, Ken called. It was the first time he reached out since I left the house, over half a year ago.
What did you tell Sally? Just the truth. That I was the one paying for all the living expenses. You shouldn't have done that. Now Sally's calling me a liar. She won't even talk to me properly since then. It's all your fault.
His selfishness left me sighing.
The root of the problem is your reckless spending. You made me cover all living expenses and turned to me for more money when yours ran out. How can you say such things? Shut up. Supporting a working husband is a wife's duty. You're the one acting high and mighty. Contribute even a penny to household expenses before you say that. You have no right to criticize when you only spend on your own pleasures. Hey! Is that all you wanted to say? I'm hanging up. It's a waste of time. Wait a minute!
Ken's tone changed from brash to desperate.
I've been struggling financially since you left. If you apologize now, I'll forgive you. Come back home.
I was speechless at his continued arrogance, even in desperation. He's only thinking about himself. When I remained silent, Ken continued speaking on his own.
I can't live the same life as before with just what I earn. I'm in debt. But I have no hope of paying it back. If you come back, everything will be back to normal. So please go back. You're lonely too, aren't you?
Unbelievable.
Your salary wasn't even that bad. And you're in debt now? Still spending recklessly? I have my reasons. I can't just change how I spend money overnight.
Right, you can't let down the girls at the nightclubs, can you?
What?
Ken's reaction was more stupid than I expected, and I almost burst out laughing. Ken's stunned reaction almost made me laugh. He thought he had hidden it well.
I know about you frequenting nightclubs and promising one of the girls a lavish lifestyle after divorcing me. How did you find out about that? I have dealings with your company through my work. One of your colleagues, who's in charge, told me. There were rumors in the office about your affairs, so they thought I should know. Damn it! Who told you that? I got curious, so I hired a detective to investigate. The evidence just kept piling up. Fine dining, buying designer bags and jewelry. With all that spending, no wonder your salary vanished.
Ken fell silent. probably not expecting me to find out, let alone that it had become office gossip. It became a rumor within the company that meant that everything was poorly planned.
There are also rumors about your ex-wife. What do you mean? The reason for your divorce. You told me she left because she wanted to enjoy her life, but the rumor is that it was due to your infidelity. What? That rumor's spreading too? Is that an admission? Well, I don't have proof, but I can't trust a single thing about you anymore. I want a divorce.
Ken yelled about not accepting a divorce and me returning home, but he never apologized. Even if he had, I had no intention of going back to that house. I was thoroughly disappointed in his selfishness. When I threatened legal action, he finally agreed to the divorce. I'm finally free. I felt liberated. The divorce from Ken was finalized. My lawyer was exceptional and went the extra mile to make Ken feel the pain. I had recorded Ken's wastefulness and violence, and Sally's verbal abuse. Based on that, we demanded a substantial alimony, which he paid in full. The lawyer even talked to the nightclub girl Ken was involved with, promising not to sue her if she told the truth. Ken's financial contributions to her over the years came to light. This led to him being banned from the nightclub and losing contact with the girl he'd been showering with gifts. His bad spending habits continued, and his debts ballooned to unmanageable levels. As for Sally, she had to drop out of college since Ken couldn't pay the tuition. Her pride as a former medical student made her look down on jobs, leading to repeated rejections. A stable life could have continued if they'd valued family, but now, it serves them right. As for me, my work is going well. I enjoy spending my time and money freely, although I'm not much into material possessions. I indulge in some good wine on the eve of my days off, enjoy meals at fine restaurants. I'm planning a solo trip abroad. If I find a partner again, I hope it's someone who cherishes mutual respect. That's how I'm enjoying my single life now.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. "I will do my best." Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. "Did you not hear what I said?" "I'm sorry." I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself. This could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.